Let's make a start. Welcome, everybody. My name is Stephen Yeung. I am a professor in the Department of Geography and the International Studies major here on campus at UW-Madison. I'm also the faculty director of IRIS NRC, which is the sponsor of today's event. So IRIS NRC stands for Institute for Regional and International Studies National Resource Center. IRIS NRC supports and enhances global awareness and inspires informed thinking about the complexities of our world. We provide resources and expertise to K-12 and post-secondary educators, as well as students and the community at large. I want to make special thanks today to our co-sponsors, who are the Center for East Asian Studies and the Geography Department at UW-Madison. And you can visit their websites and also follow those on social media if you wish. Essie Lenchner will be providing the tech support for today's events. If you have any challenges, please use the chat function to contact her. We will be recording today's event and sharing the link in a post-event email, but you'll only show on the recording if your microphone is turned on to speak. If you have questions for our speaker today, there'll be an opportunity to ask at the end of the presentation, and you can also put questions in the chat. Before we begin, I want to read the UW-Madison Land Acknowledgement Statement. The University of Wisconsin-Madison occupies ancestral Ho-Chunk land, a place their nation has called their job since time immemorial. In an 1832 treaty, the Ho-Chunk were forced to cede this territory. Decades of ethnic cleansing followed when both the federal and state governments repeatedly but unsuccessfully sought to forcibly remove the Ho-Chunk from Wisconsin. This history of colonization informs our shared future of collaboration and innovation. And today, UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation, along with 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. So it's my pleasure to be able to introduce our speaker today, Professor Henry Yeung, who is a distinguished professor in the Department of Geography and also the co-director of the Global Production Network Center at National University of Singapore for a little while longer, at least, because I know that he's about to join Chinese University of Hong Kong in the new year. Henry has been an important and innovative voice in human geography for the last 3 decades. This is particularly true in the subfield of economic geography, and his work really has been exemplary in its use of cutting-edge theory and deep empiricism in an effort to understand what he refers to as global production networks and how they have evolved over time. He's published well over 100 articles, over 50 chapters in edited books, and his scholarship has been recognized with the awarding of multiple awards, including a 2022 Sir Peter Hall Award by UK's Regional Studies Association, the 2018 Distinguished Scholarship Honours by the American Association of Geographers, and the 2017 Murchison Award by the UK's Royal Geographical Society. He is the author and co-author of multiple books, the most recent of which is Theory and Explanation in Geography. However, if you want to hear about that book, which you should, you'll have to come to Science Hall, room 180 tomorrow, when we'll be having a sort of author meets readers conversation around that text. Because today, Professor Yeung is going to be talking about the book that preceded that one, which is entitled Interconnected Worlds, Global Electronics and Production Networks in East Asia. And he's going to talk to us and give a presentation for about 30 minutes about the book and how it came about and its main findings. And then we'll move into the Q&A. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Henry Yeung.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for your very generous introduction, for your invitation to give this presentation, and to all of you who have signed up. Apparently, some of you get free copies of the book. I'm so happy for you. It's a very thick book, 400-something pages, I'm afraid. So today, given the amount of time I have, I can only share a particular dimension of it with the view to excite you a little bit on related matter. This has something to do with current events, very, very important. Oh, sorry, hold on. I lost my page. Okay, yeah. It's to do with the semiconductor industry. So I've chosen to talk about this part instead of the entire book. The book is written about the electronics industry, in which you have smartphone, PCs, consumer electronics such as televisions, and semiconductors. So these are four segments in, if you like, the global electronics industry. The book tries to apply what's called the global production networks theory to explain the geography of production in these four segments, and to examine the why they are located where they are and how they are organized in terms of interfirm, intrafirm relationships, right? Today, I shall just talk about the semiconductor part of the book, partly because, there is the great trade conflict and technology restriction going on within the global economy between, for example, the US and China. So what some termed chips war. Okay, as Stephen mentioned, I'm moving to the Chinese University of Hong Kong in January. So those of you who are visiting Hong Kong and Singapore, let me know. I will see if I can meet you in either places. Okay, so in this presentation, I try to sort of pitch it at more undergraduate level so that you get a feel. So if you are more advanced than what I'm talking about, feel free to sort of raise tough, difficult technical issues, questions later on, all right? Now, the presentation will be divided into three parts. First, I will talk about some of the key geopolitical shifts going on, then what happened to the semiconductor industry. Then in the second part, I will try to argue that some of these policy challenges and problems we face today in this industry and the sort of conflicts in the industry need to be understood better through the perspective of what we call global production networks or global value chains. In other words, we take trouble with the global production networks in this particular industry in order to reflect on why perhaps some of the policy initiatives, no matter how grand and perhaps well-intended they are, may or may not work out, whether in the US or in China or elsewhere in the world. Finally, I will say a few words about research agenda and policy and practice for those of you who have an interest in some of those matters. So, research for, say, undergraduate thesis or graduate work, policy for those of you who have a policy interest. So as you know, I have written previously about the theory of global production networks with my colleague Neil Cole. So the book in 2015 is entirely so-called the theory of global production networks. In 2016, I applied it to the context of explaining East Asian development. How is it that the state is no longer able to drive development as it wish because national firms are increasingly coupled with global production networks? And today's presentation is more based on the 2022 book with Sanford, for which I focus on the electronics industry in particular. Yeah, this book recently lucky to have won the International Studies Association Asia Pacific Distinguished Book Award. And I've recently written also as a lead author, the chapter 4 on semiconductors in Global Value Chain Development Report 2023. That came out November last year. So with the World Trade Organization, so you can download the report free of. I mean, this is a WTO document. Okay, let's begin. Many of you know very well, in the past few years, we all have experienced some kind of chip shortages. The CEO warned that, the shortage will not subside until end of last year. To this year, as you know, even AI chips are short, partly because there is tremendous demand for semiconductors in the kind of post-pandemic era. Those of you who have ordered Apple products will know at one point you have to wait for months for them, which is unusual because before the pandemic, it only takes weeks to have your product shipped to you. If you have friends, family members who work in the auto industry, you will know that again, there was a time 1 or 2 years ago that car factories will have to be shut down because there are specific chips that are not available, and hence those cars cannot be rolled off the assembly line because they don't have those safety chips built in. I mean, you don't want to drive a car that will crash, isn't it? That won't warn you that it's about to crash. And that's what some chips do. And of course, some of you would have heard of also the important policy initiatives. You don't often see an American president, and yes, outgoing one now, holding a wafer. I mean, this is a wafer, 12-inch, that contains few hundred cores These are the cores that when you buy a chip, a computer, it says the CPU has how many cores? 20, 12, 16, whatever number. This is how those cores are contained in a big wafer. All right, this is a 12-inch wafer. And as you know, the US has launched what's called the CHIPS Act, which is $52 billion worth to help and reshore some of the semiconductor manufacturing activities by subsidizing some firms, including domestic firms like Intel, Micron, and international firms like Samsung from South Korea and TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing from Taiwan. You have thought 52 billion is a lot of money, right? Later, we'll see how it goes, all right? Then, of course, the Europeans are not slow. They are also sort of actively pursuing what's called industrial policy, meaning you choose a certain industry and try to promote those industries. In this case, same, CHIPS Act, 43 billion euro, in a similar way. These are not the chips that you can eat like these guns, all right? These are chips that when you eat, your doctors will be very happy, but your insurance will cry. Now, let me say a few words about geopolitical shifts, all right? First is to say, we know there is continual trade tension since the Trump administration. And of course, the so-called tariff war is not just between the US and China, but also the US and Europe and China, and so on and so forth. Now, of course, that trade tension has not subsided as of today, and we don't know what will happen on 5th November. It may get escalated. But the whole point is that there is tremendous tension in the world economy in relation to trade, but there are other aspects, technology aspect I will talk about. But before that, it's important to also take note that, unfortunately, the world has also fallen into actual territorial wars, right? So you have Russian invasion of Ukraine, you have right now the Middle East wars going on, and all of this actually directly or indirectly influence semiconductor manufacturing. So for example, Ukraine actually produced some gas and rare minerals that are used in chip production. So is Russia. However, even if we did not have any geopolitical tension, assume none of the trade conflicts, wars happened, nothing like that. We're in good time, happily, having fun. And yet, in the technological sector like semiconductors, it will always be moving and competition will always be there, which is just a characteristic of what we call capitalism, right? So this is the creative destruction of capitalism that firms will always try to outcompete each other, come up with new products. So for example, today's NVIDIA, the graphics chip maker, become such a top company in AI chips, when earlier on it wasn't that outstanding, right? So now clearly NVIDIA has outcompeted Intel, AMD, and many related competitors in this particular market known as AI chips. So in that sense, technological competition is always an important dimension of this particular industry and in fact across many different industries. Now, again, just to put into context, the global semiconductor industry is worth about 500 billion now in terms of sales. And out of the 500 billion, roughly half will go into smartphones and PCs. So it's you and me who actually are the key customers in the semiconductor industry, all right? And then, of course, what we do in terms of social media, digital platform, all this will contribute to what is called server. So there are many servers which are needed to save what we do, right? So whatever you do on Facebook, on Instagram or TikTok, you'll be saved. And you put in the cloud, you'll be saved, yeah, in AI servers. So because of that, again, the AI server will also take up another maybe 20%. The remaining 30% goes to automotive chips and industrial usage. So that's roughly what the semiconductor industry is about. Now, what I want to put to you is this problem. This problem is that, of course, many national governments lately have found out that, oh no, we are not making enough chips, right? And all major or more advanced chips are made in East Asia. Yeah, much of it in Taiwan, some in South Korea, and of course China is the worrying one because it's trying to catch up in terms of the chip making technology. So you have the US, you have Europe trying to come up with what I will call defensive industrial policy. Defensive meaning you're trying to defend your existing capacity in making chips. So earlier I mentioned 52 billion is a lot. But of course, in as someone who knows the industry well, I would say it's not enough. It's actually very small. Why? Look at the numbers. All right. And of course, this is when Joe Biden in March went to Intel's factories in Arizona, Chandler, to announce the $8 billion out of 52 that will be given to Intel to subsidize its factory building. Factories in semiconductor are short form known as fabs, F-A-B-S. All right. However, let me give you in some context. If you look at Taiwan, TSMC per year invests between 30 to $36 billion per year in their own factories in the past 3 to 4 years. Samsung is even bigger, invests anything between 36 to $40 billion per year. Intel, 20 to 25 billion per year. Three of them, the three leaders in the industry, invest 100 to over 150 billion per year, all right, in their factories, whether new factories built or maintenance of existing factory, change of the equipment, which is very expensive. So what is 52 billion over many years, right? It's actually a very small change, a drop in the ocean in this particular industry. It's not that big as it appears. I know 52 billion given to UW Medicine will basically give all of you free education for generations, but I suppose that's not possible. Now, once you have an idea of the significance of what we call capital investment, this is a very capital intensive industry. And in my 2022 book, I went into great details about some of those capital requirements, the amount of investment, and that's over a long period, over 20-year data I have, into great detail to show you that this is not an industry for any governments to intervene in if you don't have a deep pocket, all right? Because the firms themselves have deep pockets, and of course, they know what they're doing. So as some of you might have heard, the TSMC Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Fab in Arizona was supposed to be built and was, of course, originally promised in 2020 to Donald Trump at that point. And it was a 5 nano fab that was meant to be opened as of April last year, all right? April this year, 2024. So clearly there is I remember announced in 2020, meant to be in operation 4 years later, this year, April, but now there is delay until at least next year this time, next year, April also. Why? Because it's not so simple when it comes to building wafer fabrications or semiconductor chip manufacturing. Not as simple as you think. Once you understand the complex global production networks that go into the making of chips. So in that sense, industrial policy with this kind of idea that we want chips to be made in country A, B, C, D, E is not that simple, because as you will find out in the next slide, as the CEO of TSMC, and he's now the chairman as well, because the former chairman Mark Liu has stepped down already. So he actually talked about this 2 years ago when he went to the south of Taiwan to open their most advanced fabs, which is a 3 nano fab that makes currently the iPhone 16 chips. Yeah. So as C.C. Wei said, everyone wants to build their own semiconductor factories, but is that realistic? If it was that easy, there would be chip making plants everywhere in the world already. All right. So this part tells you from a very industry veteran that this is not for the faint-hearted. This is an industry that only a few can whether afford it and then do it well. You can afford the $30 to $50 billion costs involved in building the fab and running it, and you still need to have very, very good engineers to actually get that going. And that's what the next statement tells you. Take TSMC itself, for example. Even within our own company, transferring technologies we developed from the Taiwanese city of Hsinchu. Hsinchu is just north of Taichung, means the middle of Taiwan, to our site in Tainan, means the south of Taiwan. The latest 3 nano fab required a lot of hard, painstaking work. Never mind moving from Hsinchu to the United States. Now, remember, the distance between Hsinchu and Tainan is only less than 1 hour high-speed rail in Taiwan, all right? So it's that near. I mean, I took 4.5 hours to drive from Minneapolis to Madison today, all right? Just arrived. I am in Madison, yes, despite you see my backdrop like my home in Singapore, tropical garden, but I'm actually in Madison. But to move the expertise that are developed in Hsinchu and Tainan to Arizona fab is not simple, because you're talking about building a very, very sophisticated kitchen. So the metaphor I want to give you is that for wafer fabrication, it's a very sophisticated kitchen with very, very expensive equipment, and only some engineers can get it right to configure in a way that will generate what we call good yield. So you want good, it's like making burgers. You want all burgers are edible and good, right? Taste good, not only some. So as many governments are pumping in lots of money to invest in building new factories, billions of dollars, actually last year, 2023, this year is not over yet. Last year, most of the world's semiconductor firms, as you can tell, are in negative, meaning last year, the global semiconductor industry was actually not doing well. What that means is that lots of the investment going on right now may lead to underutilization, meaning you have factories built, but they are not well utilized. But remember, because they are so expensive to build in billions of dollars, every day you're not maximizing the production at 100%, you are losing money for obvious reasons. Yeah, you need to run this 24/7 at maximum capacity. Why is the global semicon industry not doing so well in 2023, for example? If you look at what you and I did, that is the problem. Let's ask ourselves, how many of us actually bought a new smartphone or a new PC in the past 2 years? Again, I bet less than half of us. So that in turn means half of the world semicon market does not have the support of many of us. Yeah. So this year may be doing better. We'll see how iPhone 16 is doing, and so on and so forth. So these figures give you some sense that despite tremendous government interest all over the world in building semiconductor capacity, this industry often suffer from, an industry people know, from a kind of cycles of about 10 years, right? So you often have the ups when everybody have a good time, make money, they invest more capacity, and then overcapacity leads to then slump in market demand, and some firms will go bust, and then the existing ones will pick up, and then due to shortages, the chip prices will go up again. So that's the boom and bust scenario. And as we talk about the CHIPS Act driving, supposed to reduce, right, the sales of chip making tools to China. And meanwhile, actually, if you look at 2023 and 24, China actually is able to buy more and more kitchen, if you like, kitchen equipment, all right, to make the burgers. Taiwan is, because TSMC is reducing its investment in tools because it needs to put in the investment elsewhere, such as in Arizona and in Japan and so on. South Korea is staying steady, EU steady, and Japan steady. US actually kind of declined a little bit. So if you look at what happened during the time period when CHIPS Act was announced and implemented in the past 2 years, actually China has been buying lots and lots of equipment to make chips. Meanwhile, funny enough, the equipment makers, meaning the kitchen makers, all right, this is the ASML from the Netherlands, the Tokyo Electron from Japan, Lam Research, KLA, and Applied Material. These three are the US biggest chip equipment manufacturers. Their own investment in the past 1 year has gone down, meaning since the CHIPS Act, they themselves have invested less in developing new machines and so on and so forth. So interestingly, in the real world, the industry is not corresponding with, if you like, the policies that has been implemented. So these are the conundrums and the, if you like, puzzles for us to resolve. Why is that the case? How can that be? You would have expected with big government interest and involved investments, chips firm, semicon firms will push all the way to make more, and then of course, equipment guys will do more. So this requires us to take trouble with global production network. Now, this field of study is very big. It's been around for almost 30 years. I've co-authored a paper with some business school colleagues and published in Journal of International Business Studies. You can free download this that summarizes the literature that cuts across development studies, economic sociology, international economy, international economics, economic geography, my own field, regional studies, so on and so forth, all right? And that's the journal where you can download the paper. Now, let me say a few words about the semicon industry in terms of the organization of its global production networks, so that then you will know why there are so many difficulties in terms of making new chip factories. One, the industry is organized into two ways, all right? So you have chip companies that design chips, but they don't have factories. So they are fabless. So fabless, such as Apple, that designs the chip that go into our iPhone, Qualcomm, that designs the wireless chips that go into our smartphones beyond the Apple brand. So if you're Samsung or any other brand, you're likely to have a Qualcomm Snapdragon processor in it. Advanced Micro Devices, NVIDIA, these other graphics processing units, and lately AI chips. And they don't make the chips. They actually design and outsource the chip making to foundries, means chip makers, such as TSMC and Samsung Foundry from South Korea. On the other hand, you have chip companies that actually design and manufacture their own chips. We call integrated device manufacturers, IDM. So Intel designs the microprocessor and makes it in its own factories in the US, in Ireland, and in Israel. Samsung designs the memory chip and is the number one in memory chip market, and has its own factory in South Korea, primarily making those memory chips. All right. Now, these are the two ways of organizing the industry. And it sounds simple, but now the problem is the middle part. Actually, to do what these guys design and manufacturers do, is you need a lot of suppliers of different kinds. You need tools, EDA, for electronic design automation. So you need software. It's almost like I need Zoom, I need PowerPoint, which are two different companies to do this presentation to you, right? Plus the hardware you have, which is the computer. You also need intellectual property rights because, of course, chip design is not everything start from scratch. You actually build on somebody else's design. You need a certain mask to do the lithography, equipment I mentioned earlier in the kitchen, and you need the chemicals, very specialized chemicals. So let me give you some idea, right? So silicon is made out of sand, and of course, we make it into like a big tube and cut it slightly, very thinly as a 12-inch wafer. You have design software, and then you have this mask. It's like a film that help you to use light to beam through to the each of the core in order to kind of photocopy the lines, which is what this process is about. All right, I can't go into great details. If you're interested in chip making, you can go YouTube and find many videos from Intel, from Micron, and others showing you exactly how they do the chip making, so to speak. All right, TSMC probably has the same. Now, this is what a factory looks like. Inside is a very clean room operation. Very few people work inside. You don't need that many because they're all technologists, engineers, and in their white bunny suits, because like this guy in white bunny suit, because it has to be absolutely no dust, dust-free, absolutely. All right. And then this is one of the big machines. Look at a human, is that small? So it's as big as your whole wall in front of you. If I'm presenting in person, I will show you the wall. And that's what the ASML, extreme ultraviolet, this is a violet color, right? Extreme ultraviolet machine, which is worth 200 million euro to buy. Without this machine, you cannot produce chips below 10 nanometer. So the smaller the nanometer, the more transistors you can put into the chip. And in other words, you can make the chip more powerful, basically. The most recent chip of A16 of iPhone 16 contains roughly about 60 to 70 billion transistors, right? In the chip that is in your mobile phone, all right, in the size of a thumbnail. Can you imagine putting 50 billion pins on your thumbnail? I think your thumbnail will be broken, right? So the moral story is it's so small, and that can only be done at nanometer scale, all right? So this is a typical figure which I've drawn and published in the book. The book version is just black and white, so this version is color. So hopefully it looks nicer, because obviously harder for physical books to print color pictures. All right. So you will have chip design such as Intel in California, Silicon Valley, Santa Clara. All right. Chip design done. You need software. All right. You need then you need chip making devices that to be shipped to the manufacturers. In this case, say TSMC in Taiwan. Then Taiwan will have this front end fabs, and then using the machine that, for example, has to be shipped from the Netherlands. All right. And then after the chips are made with ingredients from Japan as well, then the chips will go into, say, Chongqing in China to be assembled into, say, computers, or Zhengzhou now in terms of making iPhones, and so on and so forth, and then shipped to each of us, customers in Sydney, Rio, Florida or where we are, Wisconsin, Madison. My geography not so good, so don't ask me exactly the Madison those locations. Somewhere here, I suspect. No, the Great Lake is here, right? So somewhere here. All right. So this is a simple version of the global production networks of semiconductors. All right. So that gives you some idea that to actually develop this industry, you need to work with many different partners in many different countries, because the ecosystem can never be localized in one single national territory. Not the United States, nor China, nor Japan, and so on and so forth. Now, as we are talking about the big worry that the US is falling behind in semiconductors, and is that really true? Actually, what you get from this is the 2020 data, that actually is not that true. If you look at the significance of the US controls some 46% of the market. As of today, in fact, the past few years, because the prominence of AI chips, the US share in the market should be more than 50% now, meaning more than 50% of the world's chips made belong to American companies' sales. All right. So TSMC makes for Apple chips, yes, but Apple chips accounts for some 25% of TSMC's business. So meaning 25% of TSMC's output belong to Apple, the United States. Yeah. So if you look at manufacturing, South Korea, Taiwan are 20% each over, and China 15, and the US is low. It's about 10, 12. Yeah. So this is the worry. Europe also is about 10%. So in that sense, the worry is about, despite the fact that the US controls the industry in terms of market, how is it that so little is made in America, 10% instead of 50% market share, right? Is that a big problem? Now let's look at in the Global Value Chain Development Report for this table, you can go back to that. If you look at the software sector, remember I mentioned you need software to design the chips. 72% is controlled by US firms. There are only a few US firms that dominate this industry. All right. If you look at chip design firms, again, almost 70% US. Again, this is the Apple, AMD, NVIDIA, Qualcomm, Broadcom. Only one Taiwanese company called MediaTek is strong. In China, only Huawei's HiSilicon in-house. Not that many outside the US. All right. So US is very, very strong in chip design, as well as equipment. All right. Equipment is 40%. 40% of the kitchen equipment is made by 3 US companies: Applied Materials, KLA, and Lam Research. All right. So the US is actually very strong in different segments of the global semiconductor industry. What about China? China is not strong in all, except further down the value chain, if you like, further down in assembly, packaging, and testing, which is almost 40%. This is after the chip is made, and you need someone to kind of put it together, to test it, to package it, and that generally is seen as a more labor-intensive, also less value-added activity. In other words, not the kind of activity you would like to locate in high-cost countries. So that's the issue. So finally, let me say a few words about, I hope you have a sense that this is industry that you can only try to sort of get into certain parts of it and hopefully excel in doing that, rather than capture the entire value chain, entire industry. So in my 2022 book, I went into great detail showing how the 4 causal factors in our GPN theory, known as cost capability ratio, market imperative, financial discipline, and risk management or mitigation, how the 4 factors work in different industries in terms of smartphone, PCs, semiconductors, and TVs. They are different. Each of these 4 have different kind of combination of the causal factors. All right. So in semiconductors, for example, you have companies like Intel, which designs and makes its own chip, vis-a-vis direct competitors like AMD that does microprocessors but doesn't have any manufacturing facilities anymore. All right. So in the same industry, you can have different firms from the same country, in this case, US origin, actually pursuing very different strategies. So the question is, why? Why is it that some of them do it in-house, some of them outsource, and so on and so forth? And we know lately, because of the geopolitical conflicts and the pursuit of industrial policy, the role of the state becomes very important, right? So some argue that the state has not been well theorized within what's called the Global Production Network 2.0 theory. But the argument we are trying to make is that we have incorporated into the relationship between firms and extra firm actors. But the state itself normally is not an economic actor. The state doesn't run the factory, all right, so to speak. The state tries to get firms to develop factories. So in that sense, the state is a constitutive part, but not necessarily a causal driver of global production networks. But it's a risk factor. So many CEOs today are figuring out what will happen to you guys' election in this country in order to consider, America is a risk now, right? So in that sense, many CEOs, whether in the US or outside, are figuring out and trying to mitigate, the risks associated with a US presidential election outcome as well. So finally, just three key issues for policy and practice. One is that technology will continue to be evolving and reshaping the global production networks, in this case of semiconductors, partly because it's also a huge enabling factor for the digital platform economy. Without advanced chips, you never get this great. I mean, we can't do Zoom if we don't have great chips helping us running, as we are talking. Second is that you also want to, many people talk about, many government firms want to increase their network resilience. They don't want to be over dependent on one supplier. Yes, but the problem is the moment you want to bring in more suppliers to increase your resilience, that means costs will go higher, right? Because you're not using just the best supplier or the most preferred supplier. You are going down to the second best. Sometimes you go to the third best. So obviously the cost and reliability may also suffer. So resilience is not cheap, basically. Finally, it seems that the politics of global production is increasingly, I'm going to use the word Trump, increasingly trumping the issues at stake. I mean, we used to take this as a kind of fairly stable political environment or geopolitical environment for global production networks to thrive, for globalization to kind of really hopefully level the economic development in different parts of the world. But now state level politics seems nationalism or technological nationalism have become a much more risky factor in terms of shaping how production should be organized. Should it be localized, reshored, or regionalized, or again re-globalized? Again, this is a factor that cannot be overlooked, but on the other hand, it's complicated. So, thank you, Center for Regional and International Studies. If you're interested, of course, I welcome further discussion in relation to both the book and the chapter in the Global Value Chain Development Report. Thank you. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you so much for a wonderful and really insightful talk on this particular industry. We're going to open it up for questions, so you can either raise your hand or your hand icon, and Essie, you'll unmute them, I think, so that you can ask a question, or you can put a question into the chat and have me attempt to read it for you, but whichever works best.
I've opened the chat as well, so if you type a question, I can straight away respond as well. So feel free. Yep, we'll be here until 5 o'clock. So
yes.
Yep. Go ahead, Jenna.
Hi, sorry, you might hear the banging in the background.
No
I was
problem.
wondering what policies that might help aid the political world between nations. What besides the CHIP Act, what you said wasn't enough in funding for all the different manufacturing companies, but do you think that other countries as well can kind of chip in with similar acts, or do they already have that to help in building our chip industry and making it more marketable after the downside of it since COVID?
Yeah, thank you. This, of course, an important, I presume, policy question for, in this case, the United States. I mean, if the CHIPS Act may not be sufficient, how else can, say, well, I suppose allies of the US help, right? So of course, I am not in good position in giving advice to the US government. The point I want to make, though, is that I doubt other countries are able to help the United States in terms of, for example, funding for obvious reason. I mean, this is already not usual that the US actually use, if you like, national funding to subsidize firms. I mean, industrial policy, generally speaking, is not as welcome. It used to be a dirty word. I mean, in East Asia, we do it a lot, industrial policy, but the American economy is meant to be market driven, not to be having state intervention in a sense. So, the neoliberal economists will never accept industrial policy because it should be market driven. All right. So the short answer is that in terms of funding, it's not going to be easy to have other countries helping out. But in terms of technological alliances, the US is trying to pursue what's called the Quad 4 alliance, trying to get Japan, Taiwan, and the Netherlands to kind of help to be an ally in developing the kitchen equipment, if you like, and find ways to restrict the sale of those equipment to China. So even that, the Dutch, for example, is trying to do it. But ASML, the Dutch company that currently is the most valuable company in the entire Europe, means the highest market value, market capitalization, ASML. The company and the CEO came out and say, no, we don't want the government to tell us what to do. So they don't like intervention. They don't want restriction. Japan is even slower, Japan and South Korea, partly because the huge presence of their goods in terms of China market makes it difficult for their government to feel entirely on board with the US initiative. So as you can tell, this is quite complex matter. There is no easy way out, and hence we can only evaluate the policy outcomes in the next, say, 5 years. Yeah. So thank you. Before we go to Justin, maybe I respond to Angel's question, and Leo. There is a nationalism in China about chips. Well, I mean, the pursuit of technological nationalism is not new. All right. I mean, South Korea did it with what's called the Park Chung-hee days. And this is how you see the South Korean economy doing well today. So Samsung was chosen to be an electronics firm. Hyundai was chosen to be an automotive firm. All right. So techno-nationalism is not new. The US also tried to make it difficult for Japan in its time in the 80s when Japanese memory chip makers were beating American chip makers badly in the 80s. And hence, in that sense, techno-nationalism today is just a repeat of what happened in the past. Except, of course, in the case of China, I think there is some kind of so-called national security interest in this from the US on China. All right. So the new dimension is geopolitics, so to speak. And then Angel's question, the cost of access and differentiator decision, Samsung decision open. Okay, I have no idea the exact because I didn't interview. I mean, in the 2022 book, the interview with Samsung was done in 2018 and 19. So before they decided to go to Michigan, I think was it in Michigan? Their fab, I thought it's in Texas. In Texas, I think TSMC's decision was in Arizona. I mean, my sense is that it's got to do with the specific incentives that the Arizona state government offered, right? So there is a lot of interstate competition within the US for foreign investment. This is common. It's no different from the days when different states compete for Japanese automotive investment. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we can go back to Justin now. Justin.
Thank you very much for your talk. I would say I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on how these large packages of government subsidies relate to, especially in the United States, relate to kind of the political economy of the technology industry, and whether these subsidies, and specifically like the subsidies passed by the US, represent like a genuine attempt at policy intervention to solve a problem, or kind of rent seeking by American firms to intervene in market structures and change what might be otherwise a system that was capable of delivering these products in a way that would benefit American firms and investors. And then furthermore, kind of, I would ask if you could also maybe speak to your thoughts on that in the context of American industrial policy being, as you said, it used to be kind of a dirty word in the US, but in the context of the literature that discusses American industrial policy as kind of formed in national security policy, and particularly like Pentagon investments being America's stand-in for industrial policy? Thank you.
Right, thank you. I mean, these are tough questions, Justin, and probably the first one is easier for me than the second one. The first one is to say, to what extent is the sort of genuine government initiative rather than firm lobbying, right? Intel obviously is one of the key lobbyists behind the CHIPS Act. But as you know, the CHIPS Act end up also being reasonably open to foreign investors, such as TSMC and Samsung. They also got 8 billion each. So in that sense, if you were Intel, you wouldn't be too happy, right? I mean, in theory, you would like it to be American firms only. So I think the initiatives had huge American chip maker interests. So Intel, Micron, and Global Foundry is US based, but actually Middle East owned. However, whether this has the political support, it seems to be the case. So I have no domain expertise in terms of studying the if you like, the evolution and formation of this particular policy within the US politics context. I mean, there are other political scientists who study this. But my sense is that, you know, this is not a policy that is only, for example, Democratic Party. I mean, it already started during the Trump administration. And the initiative to bring TSMC in was done by Trump in his time. He actually went to open ground. So in that sense, it seems to me there is bipartisan agreement that industrial policy is necessary to revitalize American manufacturing broadly conceived. And chips is perhaps the most obvious one, because America still has market lead. And as you can tell, actually, the US is not weak at all. It's only the manufacturing part. And manufacturing part is only, how do I put it, is only in a particular kind of chips, which in this case is what we call logic chips, means essentially go into your smartphone. Because in memory chip making, Micron is doing fine. Microprocessor, Intel is still dominant player. 82% of the world's PCs will have Intel chips in it, or Intel inside. So in that sense, I think this is kind of a, if you like, conjuncture of firm lobbying and, if you like, then the government, the administration, the prevailing administration, starting with Trump, wanting to be seen as doing something to revitalize, to kind of make America great again, so to speak. That brings me to your second question: to what extent this is a national security mix-up, so to speak? Maybe. But it seems to me the trade policies, not just US-China, but US-Europe as well, also has some of these components. So nowadays, actually, if you talk to international trade policymakers, you'll know that they increasingly find during trade negotiation, during trade discussion, you have national security people coming in and say, oh, no, this one you can't do because of national security. So national security has become a slogan. It's almost like a black box. And of course, the trade people will say, oh, yeah, then can you explain how is that national security problem when we should import less toys from China, you know, that kind of thing. So the point I'm trying to make is that national security now has been used as a kind of excuse for all kinds of interventions you want to make without really explaining in detail how it actually worked out, all right? So hopefully that gives you some flavor of my own view on this matter. Let me then move over back to online to see, okay, Sebastian, is it possible that the market overinvest in this due to the prospect of AI? And then entirely possible. Okay, so AI is, okay, situation is this, right? 2024, those who are making chips for AI are doing well, right? chips which will be the AI chips, such as NVIDIA chips made by TSMC. So TSMC is doing very well. And the memory that go into the AI chip as well, the high bandwidth memory, HBM. So SK Hynix is a market leader from South Korea. Samsung is trying to catch up, Micron also lately. So all of them want to, because the AI chip has embedded memory in it as well. Whether this will lead to overcapacity, irrespective of the AI prospect, it will be overcapacity for sure, because there are so many new fabs are being built, both in the US, in Europe, and in Asia. All right, it's a matter of who eat who later on. So meaning, of course, the fact fab needs between 2 to 3 years to build. All right, minimum. So meaning, we started really massively pushing for it maybe 2021, 22 onwards. So the new fabs are coming on stream now, and in the next 5 years, and hence in the next 5 years, you're going to see overcapacity and see how the different segments of the firms, the one have a deeper pocket, will be able to survive it. So this is a dog eat dog industry in that sense, all right? Then moving to Laurie's question, if the process of chip making is spread over the world, let's say China's threat to manufacturing, how would China be like a call? Oh, okay, so now yeah, good question again. First, chip making is highly concentrated geographically. So I published a paper in 2022 in economic geography. Also, actually, in the book, if you read the segment on semiconductors, you will know exactly where the factories are. It's only in very few countries. I mean, give you an example. I mean, India is so strong in doing software and the like. India doesn't have a single chip making factory. Why? Because for chip making, you need very stable electricity. You need lots of water. So I know Arizona, why you set up fabs is very funny. It's not exactly. Arizona has lots of water, yeah? TSMC in Taiwan takes up 10% of Taiwan's water and 10% of Taiwan's electricity, all right, to make your iPhone chips. So those of us iPhone users, please be grateful, all right? People in Taiwan have less water to drink because of us, and they have to use candles at night. No, I'm kidding. They don't. But the point is electricity is a lot. You need very stable electricity. So it's only in the US. Singapore, we also make about 10% of the world's chips. Taiwan, and then some European countries, and South Korea and Japan. That's it. Malaysia has a little bit. So that's all. Israel, yeah, that's all. So it's only less than 10 territories, yeah? Okay, so with that in mind, what's the so-called threat from China? Now, China has never, even before the technology restriction imposed since about 2020, China has never been a leader in chip making. Never, all right? It's at least 3 years behind TSMC, Samsung, and Intel, at least 3 years. With the restriction since 2020, it's even harder, maybe 5 years. Why? Because now you're not allowed to buy the most sophisticated kitchen equipment. So how are you going to make the same burger as good as me, right? So in that sense, the China threat to the US is very much as the response I gave to Justin earlier is more to do with the national security consideration. It has to be, all right? So the idea is, yeah, you don't want China to catch up in more advanced chip making so that they can use it for military purposes or for whatever other purposes, yeah? So, but question is, how effective is that? So that is another matter. For example, the restriction of the advanced equipment is to make sure that China cannot make the most advanced chips for AI, right? So even NVIDIA is forbidden from selling the most advanced chips, AI chips, to China. But as you can tell, I mean, I can buy the AI most advanced NVIDIA chip, which is only $200,000, the most advanced one, and then carry it to China, smuggle it in, right? I mean, it's not that big. So the problem with restriction on chips is that chips are very small. It's very transportable. It's not like the ASML machine is so big, you need special aircraft to fly it, all right? Chips, each of us can bring one chip into China and then we can sell it for big money, yeah? Moral of the story is quite easy to smuggle. It's very difficult. I'm not entirely convinced this restriction will work at all, all right? By the way, NVIDIA also tried to design a lower version for China anyway. Okay, no hand raised, then I shall continue then with Rachel in this case. Rachel's name sounds like from Singapore, Malaysia. What are the differences in labor protection? Oh, different. Okay, wait. From Singapore, yeah, fellow Singaporean, yeah, welcome. Yep. Are there stronger chip worker in some? Oh, okay. I don't work on labor worker issue in the global production network study or GVC literature, but of course there are many people who are interested in the labor side of GVC and GPN. But my sense is that I don't think it's highly unionized in this industry, but TSMC's investment in Arizona actually face union resistance. That in turn explains why TSMC had a harder time bringing in the key Taiwanese engineers to set up the fab, means the kitchen in Arizona. That in turn leads to the delay. All right, because remember, this is a kitchen that is meant for more than the 3 Michelin star chef. This is a chef who must be able to utilize all the tools in the kitchen to make all kinds of food, Indian food, Chinese food, Japanese food, American burgers, steak, in the best way. So only the engineers in the TSMC, Hsinchu or Tainan fabs knew how to put the equipment together, yeah, to make those. So even if you take Intel workers in Arizona, they can't really help to set up the fab because they don't have experience in this kitchen. You know, Intel is a French 3 Michelin star chef, okay? They only do French food, which is the microprocessor. So that's why it's very, very difficult to shift fabs, and hence engineers and workers are important. But I don't go into the specific issue of worker resistance, so on and so forth. Finally, let's go to hygiene. See how the current continue. Well, let's see the newly in the semiconductor industry, who will be the next wave of, yeah, I mean the next newcomer, Japan, ironically. Japan is going to be the next comer, not late, because Japan used to be very good in chip making, but because of the 1980s US restrictions on markets, then Japan chip makers losing their shares and eventually almost went bust. So today only Toshiba makes memory chips, and Japan right now is trying to set up a new foundry making logic chip known as Rapidus with IBM technology at 2 nanometer. So maybe that is something that Japan may be able to catch up and change the rule of the game if they succeed. So that remains to be seen. Apart from that, I don't think of anybody else who will have a new entrant in this particular very difficult capital intensive market. Yep. Thank you all. Pass back to Stephen.
Thank you so much for the very lively Q&A as well, and for all your questions. What a great opportunity to learn so much about this particular industry. I will simply close by saying thank you so much to Professor Henry Yeung for driving down from Minneapolis in time to be able to participate in this event today and share his ideas with us. And a reminder that you can also see him speaking in person at Science Hall, room 180 tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. So please do join for that event as well, about a different book. And in the meantime, I've got my copy. Some of you all will be receiving a copy as well. And please do get a hold of it because it is a fabulous read and a really rich and insightful book. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you in particular to Professor Henry Yeung, and thanks for all the input.